My name's Chris Welch, as you will have gathered. I have a badge that says artist on it. I don't consider that to be completely accurate. It's not that I don't want to be an artist, but I'm actually a physicist-turned-engineer. I work at the International Space University in Strasbourg. We are not a science school. We are not an engineering school. We are a space school, and we are resolutely interdisciplinary. I'm very pleased to see a number of members of the ISU community here, who will be talking and are present. So I said I would go up first, so I would give a quick overview of art in space, because I don't know how many people in the audience, know about art in space. You can tell I'm an engineer and probably a professor from the slightly didactic nature of my slides. So, Roger Molina, who I think isn't here anymore but was here until yesterday, has characterized space art into 7 main areas. It would take me all the 6 minutes to explain those, so I'm only going to talk about two merged together, which is actual art in space, so not art about space on the ground or anything else. Also, with only 6 minutes, I'm not going to consider a whole bunch of things. I've had to, curate a little bit, so no solo works by astronauts, no photography, no performances, no coverage of Elon Musk's, Tesla in space, and a debate about whether that counts as art or not. So, going right back then, 1961, some of you will know I have an interest in poetry, so I was pleased this was the first slide. There was a poem by Thomas Bergin, which was etched onto a communication satellite, onto an information panel on a satellite, which was launched into orbit then. And that is still in orbit, and as far as I've been able to determine so far, I think that is probably the first kind of piece of art in space. Not visual art, though. First piece of visual art is something called the Moon Museum, which is this little etched ceramic plate with images by 4 artists of the time. It's not absolutely sure that that is on the moon. Allegedly, it was attached to one of the lunar lander legs by one of the technicians. Okay, so nobody has actually seen it. The astronauts didn't see it was on the moon when it was on the moon. It wasn't announced until after they came back. So until somebody visits the site of Apollo 12 and kind of pulls the blanket apart to look, we don't know for sure. But that is genuinely considered the first genuine space art, visual art work on the moon. Another one, also with some controversy attached to it, is the Fallen Astronaut, which is a little aluminium sculpture about so big by the Belgian artist Paul van Huyendonck. And this again sort of unofficially ended up on the moon. There was some debate afterwards about what it was meant to be. You can see there's a plaque behind. Dave Scott, the Apollo astronaut, considered that to be a testament to the fallen astronauts. But again, it wasn't actually announced until after the mission was over and everyone was back. So we know it's there because we have a photograph of it. But the exact terms on which it was agreed, that's more difficult to know. Later on, here we have a space sculpture which was flown in a space shuttle getaway special canister. These are canisters canisters about the size of an oil drum that would go in the space shuttle payload bay, so they would get loaded in. There was no astronaut interaction with them, but nevertheless, this went up in 1984. More things flew in space shuttle canisters. This was a good opportunity. Vertical Horizons flew 6 oil paintings. Nobody looked at them while they were in space. They just flew in the canisters and came back, but they had been to space. Similarly, Russian artist Andrei Sokolov did a series of space pictures, but this one in particular, the kind of golden space station, is supposed to have been to Mir in the 1980s. Famous piece here, Larry Burgess' Boundless cubic lunar aperture, flew as the first non-scientific payload on the space shuttle. And that went up and it carried water, it carried holograms, and when it came back down again, it was installed on the ground in the USA. Arthur Woods, American artist but based in Switzerland, flew the Cosmic Dancer sculpture to the Mir space station in 1993. He also organized the first art exhibition in Earth orbit a couple of years later, where 20 pieces by 20 artists flew and were displayed on the Mir space station, and there was an astronaut artist jury to select the winner. Then there was a zero-G sculpture piece. I haven't been able to find a picture of this in the space station, but this was taken up in 2001 by the French astronaut Claudie Enier, and this was a sort of specially designed zero-G sculpture which would move and float around. Staying in the representational area, okay, some prints by Michael Burmer, German artist, flew on the last flight of Columbia and then were brought back to the ground. How am I doing? Oh, almost 5 minutes already. This slightly strange sculpture, which you can see being held, Weltraum Visitor, was attached to the TerraSAR X satellite and launched in 2007, is therefore still in orbit. This is a big thing where they make these sculptures and give them to people to distribute where they want around the world. And a little more up to date now, a CubeSat, so a satellite about this big, UK CubeSat. This piece of art called a celestial charging station, a kind of humorous piece looking supposedly to offer space travelers the opportunity to recharge their hardware if they docked with a satellite. So they did that on one CubeSat. The company Planet, who have 200 to 300 satellites in orbit, they actually have embraced art in a big way. They have a very good artist residency program, and basically every one of their CubeSats has laser-etched artworks on the side, and they call that the largest orbital art show. More recently, the French street artist Invader has had a little one of his Space Invader mosaics taken to the space station by the ESA astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti. You can see her holding up there. Later on, it got attached to part of the inside of the space station in the European Columbus module. French artist Eduardo Cac designed this work called Inner Telescope, which was then constructed by the ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet while in space out of the materials that were available in the space station. And then getting closer, this was launched earlier this year and is still up there, Humanity's Star by Peter Beck, who is the CEO of the Electron rocket company, so launched from New Zealand, caused a bit of a stir at the time. It was called a space disco ball, and none of the astronomers liked it whatsoever. They think they got problems with that later this year. Contour of Presence, which is a project that Naum, who's be speaking later, and I are working on. You can see this little mysterious black box. We're not going to tell you much more about it than that, other than it launched to the International Space Station in June and is currently there. This is it being installed by Thomas Reiter. Not by Thomas Reiter, by Andreas Kuiper. And then, as part of that, I have a fondness for poetry, so I have a poem on the International Space Station, and this is a little bit of a section of it. It's actually about that big, okay, bent round, and it actually goes round and round and round. So it won't be the first poem in space, but it'll be the first poem that is in space that you can read from the ground. So I'm quite pleased with that. Coming back to big, shiny things in space, Trevor Paglin is going to launch this later this year, Orbital Reflector. At least he doesn't say it's anything else but a reflector. It's going to be about the size of, the length of two buses, basically, when it's up there, and it's going to be super bright and easy to see. And you can bet the astronomers really, really don't like that. But it's not going to be up there for very long. It will re-enter fairly soon. And then just kind of moving forward in 2020, the Moon Arc, an artistic archive to be delivered to the Moon on the Astrobotic lander, sorry, typo there, not Astrobiotic, in 2020, which will carry 53 individual components by artists and members of the public. So that is my 8-minute survey of space art. If you want more information, check out these two websites, both coming from Arthur Woods, who I mentioned earlier. Ars Astronautica is his kind of personal one, but it's got a good news page, and then spacearts.info. Thank you very much.